You know, I thought I'd be better at cutting than I was as a kid. I don't know if that's true. So like 6 people said they'd be interested in seeing a video like this. 1 person commented and like 6 people liked the comment. So 7, I guess. And that's enough for me. So when I was a little kid, my favorite toy was Barbie. Of course, sometimes I would do like plot lines that I thought were completely masterful, but most of the time I would just sit on the ground and dress them up for hours. And then I discovered paper dolls, and that soon became my favorite toy game. What? Is it considered a toy? I feel like it's considered a toy. According to Wikipedia, it's almost Christmas. I'm not doing any research for this video. Paper dolls have basically been around since the beginning of paper as a thing, but it was most popular around the Victorian era. It said the first manufactured paper doll was in like 1810, and I think 1810 to like the 1920s seems to be the most popular time for paper dolls. But again, it's been around before then, after then, it's been around for a while. There was also a resurgence in the 90s, and I was a kid in the 90s, but I was mostly a kid in the 2000s, but that's when I fell in love with them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Now, as an adult, as a Christmas gift to myself, I would actually like to try to make my own paper dolls. I think it'll be really fun. I've never tried anything like this before, but I've looked at enough paper dolls throughout my life that I feel like I could pull this off, maybe. Now, since it is Christmas, I think the perfect place to start would be with Christmas movies that I consider to be classics, at least in my house, and make outfits inspired by some of my favorite costumes from those movies. I actually got the stomach flu a couple of days ago, and because of that, it's not the worst illness I've ever had. I've seen people have worse, but it did make me break out in hives literally everywhere, including my face. So if you see my face and you're like, huh, that looks bumpier than normal, it is. And also, if my thoughts are more disjointed than normal, that's also why I'm a little under the weather. Also, if you've been watching my videos for a while and haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. That would really help me out. All right, let's get to it. Let's start with some research, and that's the few paper doll books I saved from childhood. These are the ones that 18-year-old me decided to keep for nostalgia reasons. I had many more than this at one point. Yeah, it's no surprise I ended up going into costume design for college. Looking at these, my favorite ones were by Tom Tierney. After buying him at one point for the first time, I didn't ever go back. In fact, he is credited with bringing back the paper doll, which, as I mentioned, had been most popular during the Victorian era. And then in this accordion binder that I've had since middle school is where I keep the paper dolls that I had cut out, organized by book. Now, this was probably what started my love of paper dolls, and that is why I had that American history one, and that is the Regency period. At this point in my life, I was obsessed with Jane Austen, and honestly still am, and I wanted to pretend that these were Elizabeth and Darcy, Emma and Knightley, Anne and Wentworth, and it all just kind of leaked out from there. I actually started having a really fun time walking down memory lane with these. I can remember how I felt about these when I cut them out when I was like 14 years old. Okay, let's move on to my design. So I first up had to make 3 people, so I'll just let you watch that for a minute because I don't have a lot to say about it. Here are my 3 models, I guess you could call them. Now let's move on to the outfits I'm going to be drawing. starting off with a big one for me, which is Little Women, 1994 specifically. I love the 2020 version of Little Women. In fact, Florence Pugh playing Amy perfectly encapsulates why Amy is my favorite sister, but the 1994 version will always be first because nostalgia, and I like the costumes more. I have to admit, I'm not going to get into that now. Just know that the costumes in this movie are perfectly aligned with the general vibes, as well as being pretty historically accurate. This is warmth in movie form for me, so I'm going to pick Joe's evening ball outfit for my first outfit. It's red with like a green-blue plaid with a huge burn at the back skirt, which I'm not going to be showing, and it's worn during at least a winter scene. I believe it's around Christmas time, if I remember correctly. Next up is a costume from probably my favorite Christmas movie ever, which is the Muppet Christmas Carol. I remember watching this as a kid and loving it, but when I was a young adult, like 21 or 22, my cousins watched it with me one Thanksgiving, and that's when I truly got hooked. I'm actually surprised I didn't watch it more as a kid because my mom is a massive Muppets fan, always have been, but somehow she missed this one. Anyway, they spent so much time and effort making these tiny, historically accurate clothes for all these Muppets, and my favorite is Gonzo's, or in this case, Dickens' outfit. It is so vibrant and bold, which would have been popular at this time, and Gonzo is also my favorite Muppet, so it's perfect. By the way, Nicole Rudolph and Abby Cox both did amazing videos on the historical accuracy behind these costumes, and I would highly recommend watching them. They are some of my favorite videos on YouTube. If you love You've Got Mail, you're definitely going to want to watch The Shop Around the Corner because it was the main inspiration for it. As you can see with Kathleen Kelly's shop also being called The Shop Around the Corner in You've Got Mail. In this version, it's two employees who dislike each other and end up falling in love. It stars Margaret Sullivan and Jimmy Stewart, who also stars in a much more popular Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And while I really like that movie, I think I like this one more for some reason, probably because I don't like being that depressed around Christmas. And this outfit I'm doing is the one she wears the first time the two are supposed to meet. Some people really hate this outfit. I saw online some of them think it looks very clownish and they hate the crisscross suspenders on a skirt, but I really love it. I think it's a really unique outfit and I kind of want a skirt like this. Now all the posters I saw had the shirt as red and white since it was a Christmas movie, but I could have sworn it was green and yellow, and when I rewatched it this year, I was right. Now, I wouldn't call Barbie and the Nutcracker specifically a very pretty movie. It has that animation style from the 90s that doesn't really read well today, but it is incredibly nostalgic for me nonetheless. I actually talked about this a lot in my last Vlogmas video, so sorry if you're hearing this again. I did ballet as a kid for almost 10 years and I really loved Barbie, so this was the perfect movie for me, and it was probably my favorite Christmas movie for several years growing up. We're going to be recreating the main sugar plum fairy outfit Barbie wears at the end, which is pink and sparkly and flowy and so fun. Next up is quite literally a Christmas classic, like I think everyone has watched this one at least once, and that is 1954's White Christmas. Now, it was actually a bit difficult to pick which costume I wanted for this one, as the two sisters, played by Vera Ellen and Rosemary Clooney, have a plethora of gorgeous clothes, but I finally decided to go for the dress that has stuck in my brain the longest, and that is the one Rosemary Clooney wears when she's run away and stopped believing in love. Therefore, she wears black. And this dress has those interesting straps and style lines and a cluster of rhinestones at the back. I just had to choose this one, even though you could say this is the least Christmassy dress in the film. And last but certainly not least is The Holiday. This is surprisingly the most recent movie I'm talking about here. I mean, I am talking about like Christmas movies I consider to be classics, but this one came out almost 20 years ago. This movie is perfect if you don't want anything overly Christmassy, but you love a very cute rom-com. I still cannot believe that Jack Black was not put in more rom-coms after this. He is so good in this movie, but I'm gonna be picking one of the outfits that Cameron Diaz wears because her character is the queen of coats in this movie, and I wish I owned all of them. Now, she wears this coat, I think 2 different times, or at least a few different times, and she wears 2 different scarves. So I chose the slightly more colorful one just for a bit more fun. After I was done drawing all of the outfits, I decided to go ahead and fill in the skin tones for all 3 people because I am out of practice and thought it would be easier to do on Photoshop. Don't judge me if they're not perfect. It's been a while since I've actually tried to render a skin tone. With each of the outfits, you could see I also tried to plan those little tabbies to actually stand up correctly. Who knows if it's correct at this point, but I tried my best to plan accordingly. Then I made the little stand areas for everyone, and then it was time to print them all out. The first thing I realized when it was finally time to sit down and paint was that my drawings were much smaller than the Tom Tierney ones, like a lot. But the paper I used was a bit on the expensive side, so I did not want to do it over. This was the paper I used, by the way. It was recommended for art with a home printer, and I think it worked pretty well. Darker skin tone details definitely got lost a bit, but I'm gonna assume it's because I made these smaller and because my printer is very old. I started out trying to only use my watercolor pencils, which are my current favorite painting medium, and a water brush. I'll put all the things that I can find in the description, by the way. The pencil color for this first one, Joe's dress, said it was true red, but it still came out a little bit pink in my opinion, so I had to go back over that and fix that later. I generally love watercolor pencils though. I feel like they give a lot more structure and control over watercolor than any other watercolor option. I also would put the paintings under a heavy book because they were starting to pucker a little bit with the water. By this point, I was discovering that I would probably need a bit more help than watercolor pencils. Part of the problem was just the texture on the page, which I thought would look nice, but it just wasn't allowing for enough saturation of the colors. So I ended up also using an ink wash and finally some watercolor markers. I also used acrylic paint for when I needed to add some lighter color, like the rhinestones at the back of the Rosemary Clooney dress and the dots on the Shop Around the Corner blouse. When I was trying to shade this coat, I used a gray watercolor marker, which came out looking so green, but I was getting tired and I didn't quite know how to fix it. So with going over all these drawings several times, I actually had to let this process bleed over into the next day. And that is why I saved Gonzo for last, because this costume has a lot of moving pieces that the end of day me wouldn't have been able to tackle well.
I can see a sea of alpine green, something that will stay with me. Sky is wrapped in blue, wish that I could share with you, like a photograph when times are good. the flower begins to bloom.
I also went back over and tried to fix the beige coat, and I think I covered it with enough sepia ink that it finally started to look okay, or at least better.
You're far, but distance doesn't break your heart. It gives us time to know our love. Grass all wrapped in you. Oh, I wish that I could lie with you. Oh, I know what I would hold on to. A memory when times are good. That's when I think of you. That's when
The watercolor pens and ink washes not only help to fix any coloring errors, they really help to define shadows, and by the time I was finished with Gonzo, I actually think I started to get the hang of the process. The last thing I did that day was put all 3 pages underneath the book again to hopefully flatten them out overnight.
That's when I think of you. That's when I think of you.
Alright, it is the moment of truth. They've been going overnight and they look like this. They're a little bit flatter. They didn't completely flatten out. I probably needed to give it more time, but that's good enough. You know, I thought I'd be better at cutting than I was as a kid. I don't know if that's true. Ta-da! Couple of issues arose while cutting these things out. The face areas were very hard to get to be cut very precisely because they are so small, and also I think the paper is a little bit too thick. Second of all, because the paper is not straight, it's kind of been warped. It doesn't sit 100% correctly on the person, so I have to use a little bit of tape, but honestly, I don't mind it and make sure that it stays in place, so that's not a big issue for me. Also, this one, I printed the wrong way, and I didn't even realize it while I was painting it or anything, but oh well, she's pretty to look at, I suppose. This was definitely not perfect. There were a lot of issues, but I had so much fun doing this. This is the start of a new hobby, I think. This took a lot more brain power than I thought it would because every step required you to think through how it was going to lay on the doll, where to put like little tabs and support so that it would sit correctly. And I didn't even do it correctly, and it took a lot of brain power for me. These definitely don't look like Tom Tierney's work, but they look like my work, which almost makes it more fun to look at because I did this. Thank you so much for coming with me on this little excursion, a little bit different from what I usually post. And because this is the last video of 2024, I wanted to thank you guys again for just being the best community. I am always so excited to post and to see your thoughts. And even though I do get social anxiety when answering comments, I love talking to you guys. It is so fun. This little community is just lovely. Thank you guys. I'm going to be taking a 3-week break. I just kind of want to take a few days off. The last time I took a week break, I actually didn't end up taking a break. I just made extra content and started preparing for extra content. That's why we have Vlogmas videos this year. So I want to take an actual break, and then I also want to prepare for things like memberships for next year. That's going to take a little bit of work and pre-planning and filming and editing and all that stuff. So I'm going to need a little bit extra time on top of just taking some time off. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday, however you celebrate, and I'll see you next year. Bye.